Hello viewers, you join me for a very rare race. This is the Manufacturers Cup second round exhibition season here at Tokyo Expressway. This is a circuit that rarely ever features in sport mode. It is long overdue and we're in for a very interesting race, an intriguing race. As we head through the tunnel here, of course there is no moisture, there is no rain inside the tunnel. As we head out, you'll see the shift to a wet circuit. This race has a characteristic of changing weather conditions, which is also quite good to see. And also, let's talk about this track, Tokyo Expressway. We have one of the longest straights in the game, aside from Special Stage Route X. And we have lots of fast, twisting corners in this middle sector. Now, as you can see, I really made a massive hash of qualifying on my first attempt, eventually finishing last and miles off the pace. That is not good. Miles off the pace. We're going to have to pick this up a lot in the race. So yeah, starting 15th out of 15. This was the first slot of the day, 3 PM. We're jumping in to see how well we can go with minimal practice. So as I spoke about earlier, as we head into turn 1, this race is characterised by changing weather. We're starting off on the intermediate tyre. We turn 2, bit of a rough overtake I would say here, bit of a shoulder barge against the French driver in the Alfa Romeo. Moving up into 13th, and as we twist through the middle sector here, lots of fast sweeping corners. This is where it all went wrong. Contact with the Nissan GTR as they hit the wall, and now we have front bumper damage and front right wheel damage as another car also crashing off into barrier. Down in towards the hairpin at the bottom end of the circuit, just trying to keep within the slipstream range. I did not get a good exit there at all, and combined with the damage, you can see the cars in front easily pulling away, even the Alfa Romeo coming back through. This race was always going to be difficult with this damage. I now pretty much had to survive until the pit stop. As we come through this turn, the Renault there really showing no mercy to the Alfa Romeo, shoving him into the wall unceremoniously. Not very pretty at all, but we're just going to try and survive. This race very much is about survival, trying to stay on the track, trying to not get the penalties and not get the damage. So the Renault serves the penalty, Toyota Supra also serves the penalty, so somehow I'm up into 9th. Thankfully this driver behind opts for the bump draft, which is very helpful, as we eventually then catch up with the Nissan GT500 in front. Porsche driver goes through at the end of the straight. The straight does last near enough a minute. It is incredibly long, and therefore bump drafting is incredibly important. Porsche misjudges the braking point for turn 1 and gets bundled off into the wall. So back into 9th. We're approaching the crossover points. So that meter on the bottom left of the screen indicates the amount of moisture on the circuit. Obviously through the tunnel it's 0. Now I made a mistake here. I crossed the pit entry line. I made a late decision to go into the pit lane. I felt like it was time to cross over onto the slick tyre, of which we are only allowed to use the hard for this race. And unsurprisingly, we get the 3-second penalty. And that was the key decision really in this race. When do you swap from the inter over to the hard? And how do you judge the drying circuit? I made this mistake here through the hairpin, just going really clumsily onto the darker surface, which is obviously the still wet surface, and losing even more time. This race was very quickly going down the drain, quite like the rain that's on the circuit. And so lap number 6 now, sitting here in 12th. I made another mistake. This was just really the main characteristic of this one, loss of mistakes. And these conditions were very testing. Eventually I decided, you know what, let's box this lap. That's enough of that race. 14th, not very good at all. Okay, jumping into race 2. If I can just stay in the race, I've got a chance of getting some result. But I do need to qualify better. Yes, let's try and get a better qualifying position. Starting 15th. out of 15 obviously is not ideal, and it just gives you so much work to do and therefore so much extra risk to contend with as you fight through the pack. Now this the Honda NSX GT500 is and was quite clearly the fastest car in this race. It's dominated the leaderboards. It flew past me there as if I was standing still, and that is with slipstream disabled in qualifying. So that was just on pure pace difference alone. This Mitsubishi is a good car, but it really isn't the best around this track. I was quite fearing this combination, to be honest, the Mitsubishi around Tokyo Expressway. So I really knew that this was going to be a really difficult race to score a decent amount of points. However, we've spoken about it a couple of times already. This is one of those races that requires you to survive the drama, survive the carnage, survive the chaos, don't get the penalties, don't get the damage, and let the other drivers do that. And so if we can have a clean race, there's every chance that we can secure a good result, let's say well inside the top 10. Now this qualifying attempt was good. It was much better than my previous lap. As I crossed the line, it was 7th, but eventually it would correct itself, so I'd be starting 12th. Okay, race number 2, 12th on the grid, still 2 seconds off the pace. It's going to be difficult to secure any sort of result here, but we're going to give it our best shot. And our main aim really, of course, is just to keep it nice and clean and avoid the trouble, as we just said. Okay, let the race begin. We pull away from the line. Of course, at the start here, at the middle of this very long straight, there's no real need to go for the overtake. Let's just bump draft and see how this one plays out as we head towards the first corner. I'm going to position myself on the inside, on the right-hand side, just to really minimise the risk. And let's just see what happens here. Lots of cars in very close contention. Not quite going to go for the aggressive move here like we did in the first race against the Alfa Romeo. So settling into 11th. Look at the pack. Incredibly close, as I have to download a new update apparently. But anyway, this was a really nice move. The Alfa really not committing and carrying their speed through the inside. So you can do this with the wet line. Carry the speed around the outside. Moving up into 10th. Let's try and get through this chicane safely without making any contact. Volkswagen slow in front. I was thinking about just nipping up the inside there, but the space didn't really afford itself, didn't really open up, so having to wait for the time being. However, this car was a little bit slow, I would say, through these corners, making a mistake there. I didn't quite carry the momentum correctly to head up the inside, up the hill. So now we're just losing time and losing that gap, or creating that gap now to the guy in 8th. Big moment for that left-hander. Kind of want to get this guy a lot closer. It's really about staying within slipstream range to the cars in front as we head towards the hairpin, and therefore just after this the very long straight. So our car gets turned around there, and all of that shuffling about keeps me in close contention. So now I'm up into 8th place. That's been a successful lap 1. So just like the first race, we actually had a good opening lap, and we're going to try and capitalise on that, try to gain another position here. The Porsche makes the mistake there of moving to the right hand side. He gets shoved out of the line and loses a couple of positions, and therefore that's going to be 7th place now. So just playing this nice and sensible with the positioning, making sure we don't put a foot wrong, and it's going to be a long, difficult race in that sense. There's so many things that can trip you up in a race like this, not to mention of course the conditions, as the Lexus goes way too fast into the corner. It's flying into the wall, probably will have damage as a result. And all of these occurrences with all these different people making mistakes is only going to strengthen my chance of securing a good result here. I find myself in 6th place already. That is an incredibly good return. I'm very happy with that. But this race, of course, is going to settle down slightly, and then we'll see the true pace differentials between myself and the cars around me, as we have a McLaren directly in front. McLaren seems to be a good car around here. I think it is a decent car these days in Group 3. Maybe not the quickest, but certainly a good car in the right hands. a little bit wide here, and I would say that this section of the circuit here was my weakest. As you can see, the McLaren pulling away, and therefore I'm in danger of being cut adrift here, and I would require the assistance of the car behind, which is the Porsche in the near distance. And that's exactly what happened here on the main straight. It's the sensible thing to do. You might as well bump draft, work with each other, you both gain as a result. And so the gap came slightly down to the cars in front, and not really surprisingly goes for the inside. And to be fair, I wasn't too unhappy about that. I was very happy to work with this guy. If he wanted to go up the inside, I would tuck in behind and we could do the same in the reverse order. I would be happy to bump draft him up the straights. Those couple of cars very close by in the near distance behind, and so any mistake would be punished by being overtaken. So you had to really tread this one carefully. It was a very difficult race with these drying conditions, trying to judge levels of grip and exactly where the grip was, as the drying line seemed to change throughout the race. As you might be able to see the difference in colours on the tarmac surface, as at the moment the darker colour is where we want to be, but later on it tends to be the other way around. As we head down towards the hairpin, try to not outbrake ourselves here and go into the back of the Porsche. Definitely not close enough to that Supra now in 5th place to consider picking up a slipstream, but we'll build towards that. We're just considering, is it the right time to start heading into the pit lane? Lap 3 might be too soon, although the Supra in front, was that the McLaren in front? Sorry, the McLaren in front does go in. So we're going to gain the position. Let's continue bump drafting, gaining a couple of tenths as we do it. We've got a Volkswagen in tow just behind as well. So we've got a kind of a double whammy going on now, the double bump draft. So plenty of time being gained here against those who aren't bump drafting. Up into turn 1. Late on the brakes, of course. Let's not overcook it though. We've seen what happens with that Lexus if you do that. A little bit wide on the exit, you can see losing a couple of car lengths to the Porsche. As we just drift slightly wide, you can see now the darker surface beginning to emerge. That is the dry line, or the drying line, and you definitely want to be on it. You don't really want to be off of that. On the inter tyre it's not too bad. However, once we shift onto the hard tyre, going onto that darker, or sorry, the lighter patch, the wetter patch, that will spell disaster. So we've got to be super careful. It's really, really easy to make a mistake in these conditions. So the Porsche in front making a mistake momentarily there, but nothing major, nothing big enough such that I could get the overtake done. And it goes very wide there into the wall. Can I carry the momentum? Yes, I can. Wasn't able to do that earlier, as quite a few cars making mistakes on the exit of that corner. It's a very hard one to judge dead right. So now I find myself back in 5th place with quite a lot of cars now in very close proximity immediately behind. And once again, you know, any mistake and you're going to drop, not even just time, you're going to drop a couple of positions most likely. And so this is going to be a very hard fought race from here to the end. As we've touched upon earlier, this is always going to be a difficult race for Mitsubishi. Not the best circuit for this car, but we're going to do our best. Jumping into the pit lane, onto the hard tyre. A couple of the cars in front also jumped in, and it's hard to say which is the best lap. I think end of lap 4 was a good lap. It's got to be end of 4 or end of 5. But as you can see now, the race quite spread out with the varying strategies. Of course, quite a lot of those cars right at the very front still have to go into the pit lane. We have a nice, beautiful sunset now at Tokyo, as the track begins to dry and the rain begins to disappear. In fact, well, it wasn't actually raining at any point. It was just already was wet before the race. And so, dropping down through turn 2, quite a crucial corner this, because it leads out onto quite a long section of flat out driving, especially now that we have the hard tyre on in dry conditions, at least on this racing line. Trying to really stick onto this darker patch. Any deviations from that will immediately spell disaster, just like this, as we have a Supra there facing 90 degrees perpendicular to the racing line. And I can assure you that is not the optimal racing line through that turn. So we're going to gain a position up into 6th. Not sure what happened to that guy, but it's really easy to make a mistake. I'm guessing touch 2 wheels onto the wet surface. Just like this. On the right-hand side, right-hand wheels just on that lighter surface. Into the wall. Very lucky that I did not pick up any damage from that. That could have been a lot worse. So that just shows you you're only one mistake away. And that was half a mistake. Oh my goodness, the Volkswagen in the back of the shot. Look at that. Spinning out, collected the water. And before you know it, you are having a nice meeting with the wall. And so that's one less person to have to worry about. That Volkswagen was looking rather threatening at points. And so now I have the McLaren for company. So that's actually quite interesting. The McLaren behind, as a couple of guys in front now go for their pit stops. Let's see if it's one lap too late. So the McLaren behind actually went in front and lost a couple of seconds. So I think I chose the correct lap. Although, having said that, these cars in front, I think, were behind me. And so I stand corrected. Perhaps lap 6/end of 5 was actually the correct lap to go in. The McLaren, looking up the inside, I'm not going to go side by side given the lack of dry line. Let's slot back into single file. That's the most sensible decision. Obviously the strategy, as we've spoken about, is just trying to survive and not put yourself in any unnecessary risky scenarios. So now we have a nice little battle brewing here. I'm in 7th, however 4th is very much visible and very much possible in this race. Look at this though, the Alfa Romeo, 2 wheels on the wet surface, and boom, another meeting with the wall. It really is all kicking off. The McLaren, as a result, has a poor run. There is no way I'm not taking that space. Bit aggressive. I fight my way through to claim 5th. It's been a good lap so far, 7th to 5th. Alfa Romeo out of the race, or out of the race for 4th place, at least. He continues further back as we try to now hunt down this car, which goes into the wall. Another mistake. So many cars making the same error, dropping 2 wheels onto the wet surface, and before you know it, you're in the wall, probably with damage, but at least a lot of time lost. So we've kept the race clean so far. We've had a lucky escape with one half wall hit, but I find myself now in 4th with this McLaren for company. Are we going to be able to catch up with the top 3? They are quite far in front, so it's not going to be easy. I think the leader is actually on a no-stop strategy. Quite an interesting one. Just not bothering to pit as we get bump drafted from behind. That's very helpful. So quite interesting. Spanner in the works now. Car in the lead, still on the Inter tyre. Just going to stay out, see if they can survive. Obviously they don't lose the time from the pit stop. You didn't have to do the pit stop. So it'd be quite interesting to see if we can catch up with that guy. I'm currently now in 4th as we cross the line at the end of lap 7. 5 laps remaining as we cross the line. That was our fastest lap of the race so far. And this time around, the McLaren opting to not give the bump draft, which, to be honest, was probably the right decision, because the gap, I think, was probably too large to 3rd place. I would say that this was now really a battle for 4th, unless really that guy on Inter's made a drastic error and lost so much time and their tyres wore out very quickly. It probably wasn't going to happen, so I changed my mindset. I was really now just trying to keep with this McLaren and eventually, hopefully, fight back and retake 4th, which, to be honest, in this race, in this car around this circuit, would have been, or would be, an amazing result. So as you can tell on this lap, lap 8, the McLaren a lot quicker. I'm struggling to stay with them, but you can see the evidence here of the slipstream range. I was 1.1 seconds behind coming out of that corner onto the straight, which is actually just about within slipstream range. So I am actually going to gain, given the length of the straight, I have enough time to actually gain quite a lot. But on any traditional straight, you're probably not going to really gain that much from this sort of distance back. I'd actually end up gaining about 5 or 6 tenths. So right back in within range. However, that was about to change here as we just, again, dipped 2 wheels onto that surface and we're into the wall. Front damage again, and this is going to significantly slow me down. The gap to 6th place was 11.3, so it looked somewhat safe, and this was now a defensive race of protecting P5. However, at the beginning of lap 10, so 3 laps left to go, the guy in 6th, gap down to 9, and you can see I was just bleeding time. The gap was coming down incredibly quickly. You lose about 8 miles an hour on this straight when you have the bumper damage, and so that really does hurt you, again, given the length of the straight. However, on the final lap, the gap was down to about 4 seconds, so it's fair to say that the gap did come down significantly, and it's down to a handful of seconds. In fact, it was within actual sight. But it wasn't enough. I was able eventually to bring it home for Mitsubishi in a very solid P5 here at Tokyo Expressway. P5. I'm going to have to take that. I think in Mitsubishi, the Lancer Evo, this round was always going to be hard. So to get inside the top 5, I think that's a good result. Okay, all of that brings us to the results. I'm on for a provisional 3.6 million as it stands in this championship, needing to move... Well, I need to finish first for Mitsubishi or in the top 72 in the region to get the top amounts, which means I would have to overtake Mehdi, who is an incredibly fast top split player. Probably not going to happen. Having said that, only 1 round is counting out of the 2, so technically I am actually above Mehdi on total points right now, but that's not going to stay that way. In the region, 140th, just next to my best bud. Got max power. In fact, there's quite a few of us tied on 140th here. But that was round 2 of the manufacturers. Hope you enjoyed this one. Catch you next time. Goodbye.